Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fireside Chicago, where we host fireside chats with prominent leaders from Chicago's business community live on Zoom with Q&A. I'm your host, Tim Shum. I'm also the founder and president of a recruiting firm in town called Lucas James Talent Partners. We are coming back after a little bit of a hiatus in July. I had some travel planned with some family logistics stuff because it was social distance and all that kind of stuff. I really enjoyed being able to shut down for a little bit with all this stuff going on. But Fireside Chicago is back. We have a great August roster for you all. Of course, we're going to be speaking with Ed Scanlan today, founder and CEO of Bridge Legal. Next week, we have Kenny Estes, venture capitalist from West Loop Ventures. He's also the founder and CEO of Diffuse, which we'll get into next week. Elliot Garms of Human Predictions is going to be coming on board. Ablorde Ashigbi of 4 Degrees is going to be coming on board. We'll have a DE&I panel later in the month. And then also my friend Bobby Achedu from Accelerated Growth Advisors is going to be joining us later in August as well. Today we have Ed Scanlan, founder and CEO of Bridge Legal. I've known Ed over the past, I think 4 years or so. We've gotten to know each other in one capacity or another, just coffees, mentorship / working together in some cases as well. Ed is the founder and CEO of Bridge Legal. They provide payments, marketing, and client intake automation for the legal industry. We're going to get into that. Prior to that, he was the founder and CEO of Total Attorneys for 11 years, started it in his apartment, grew the thing very rapidly, north of 30 million. Total Attorneys was in the Inc. 500. Ed himself was in 30 under 30 for Cranes. Really looking forward to the conversation with Ed. Ed, welcome, and thank you so much for carving out the time for us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim. Honored to be here.
Absolutely. So there's so many questions that I want to ask you, but I guess for the attendees, for the audience, if you could kind of go through your background in a little bit more detail than I have highlighted, maybe kind of starting back to pre-entrepreneur days, and then how you got started with Total Attorneys.
You know, I'm not sure I ever knew pre-entrepreneur days. I think as early as I can remember, I was trying to figure out some way to do something, whether it was mow lawns or shovel snow. I used to knock on people's doors with a couple of my buddies, and for $20, we'd take all the snow off their driveway. Yeah, I mean, I started first company pretty young. I worked for a few interactive agencies, and then prior to that, I worked for United Way, which is where I kind of discovered that the internet could actually be a career. I was involved in the first electronic commerce project that ever collected money over the internet through an ACH or automated checking draw. This is back in 98, 99, and built a engine to basically take donations in with a couple vendors. And my eyes opened up. I'd always been kind of techie, if you will, that there could actually be a career here. And so I ended up working for one of the vendors that I hired at United Way. It was a small interactive agency, worked there for about a year, then worked at another one. And then that one sold. And then by the time I was 25, the dot-com bust had just happened. And it was very difficult to sell web applications for $60,000, $100,000. And all my friends that were programmers and designers were out of work. So basically started Total Attorneys with a credit card, a laptop, and a cell phone, and access to talent that were basically my buddies that I could buy them a steak and throw some beer at them and say, would you mind helping me with this code? This is a mess. I don't know what I'm doing. And it just kind of evolved from there.
So I'm trying to put myself back in that time. So you saw all these, founders, entrepreneurs, I mean, there was almost like a land grab back then in terms of the internet and how you could apply the internet to different industries and different problems. And then maybe there was some like excessivity in the capital markets that caused the bust. But in terms of why you picked Total Attorneys as your direction initially, what was the problem? What was the landscape? What was either yourself, your background, or the team that put together? Why Total Attorneys in a nutshell?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually didn't start as Total Attorneys. It started as InfraStrategy. And so we were a web development agency and would basically do work for anybody for hire. And so the first client that I signed up was a ticket broker that I'd known for a while. And they were looking to get online. And I said, hey, I can build you a website. I integrated, was one of the first people to integrate with Tickets Now, which was a local company in Woodstock, and basically put a nationwide ticket inventory kind of, at the time it was like an iframe, into their website, and there was this new thing called Google AdWords, and convinced them to give me $7,000 budget to put into Google AdWords, and this would have been 2002. Was one of the first small businesses to kind of really understand how to use AdWords. And in the first month, I took $7,000 and turned it into almost $70,000 in sales for them on nationwide ticket inventory. And my eyes just lit up. And I said, this is the business, building websites, all that stuff. That's interesting. What's really interesting is how to make the register ring for people and do it in a scalable, repeatable, and predictable way. And so I went out to try and find clients that I thought could actually leverage this new pay-per-click platform called Google AdWords, and also Overture at the time, which powered Yahoo, and found a number of clients, and one of them happened to be in the legal space, and really identified a niche there with that client, and that's what ended up kind of being the genesis that then turned into Total Attorneys, and within 3 years, it really became the main focus of the company, so much so that we renamed the company and basically focused solely on scaling that business up.
Remind me, I know we've talked about this in the past. Would you call that a tech enabled services company, or was that a tech platform that maybe did more automation? I know we're going to get into Bridge Legal a little bit. How would you categorize that initial business?
Total Attorneys was a lead generation company. We generated leads for a number of verticals of legal. So bankruptcy, divorce, DUI, injury, criminal defense, social security, tax, DUI, you name it. We had a vertical for it. In each vertical, we'd have, attorneys across the entire country. We had thousands of law firm customers, and those customers would buy leads on a zip code practice area combination. So they'd buy a DUI lead in these 13 zip codes in Cincinnati, and we would generate the leads on Google for, $18, $19, $20, and we'd sell them for, a lot more than that, $30, $40, $50, $60, $100. At the time, Google was not that competitive, and so it was really a great early mover advantage we had, where we could buy clicks that are today sometimes $22. We could pay like $1.25 for it, and so it was like just really being there early. And so the initial was basically all just a lead generation company, and then we added on technology. It wasn't called marketing and sales automation, but that's what we built. It just wasn't a thing then. But basically, we installed a call center with software that would get these leads on the phone and hot transfer to the lawyer's office. If the lawyer didn't retain that client, we had drip email. It wasn't even called drip email yet. We built these repeatable sequences of like drip emails and various things and call patterns to try and help these law firms make as much money as they could out of their marketing investment. So I would say it was a marketing platform, but a lead generation was the core revenue engine. And then over the years, we added on some additional support services as well.
Okay, interesting. I mean, you've been in the legal services space for a long time. And I guess for myself and the attendees, when I'm thinking of, I'm a partner at a law firm, I have 20 employees, I have 3 other partners, I have some paralegals, I have some junior and mid-level attorneys. My view of that industry is that like they don't have a sales department. They have a website. They might be doing some stuff in marketing, but typically from what I've seen, there's a lot of word of mouth. And I think I'm thinking the B2B, kind of legal lens, but then you also have like the advertisements out there. Hey, did you get injured with this? Or did you get a DUI? I see those ads from time and time again, but how would you kind of characterize the legal industry, maybe compared to other industries that are set up differently and do have sales departments and are maybe investing a little bit more in their sales or marketing organizations?
Yeah, well, it wasn't until the early 80s, late 70s that lawyers were even allowed to advertise. So there has been kind of this, stigma that if you have to advertise or market for your practice, it means you're not a good lawyer. Now that's going by the wayside, but I think traditionally that's maybe been something that's been kind of underpinning a lot of firms that may have been reluctant to invest in marketing, so to speak. The legal tech industry has evolved a ton over the last, how long have I been doing legal tech? 15 years, aging myself here, but it was basically nothing, very, very, small amount of people, mainly in the areas of like trying to automate document production, putting plugins inside of Microsoft Word or WordPerfect. Actually, plugins was probably even a predecessor. And now you're seeing a lot more companies that are providing technology because there is so much that can be done to improve the quality of legal service provided and reduce the cost of legal service. You know, the legal industry in a lot of ways is broken for all participants. The consumers of it, whether they're a business or an individual, often don't like the experience at all. They don't know what's going on. They're not communicated well with. They don't understand it. And then the professionals that operate inside it don't actually enjoy their jobs because of a lot of mundane rote work that needs to be done and lack of process efficiency that's been put in place. So that's where the opportunities exist, and you're seeing more and more legal tech companies produce things that drive real value for the consumers of the services as well as those who deliver them.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So yeah, there was almost intervention that withheld or kept the legal industry maybe behind the times. Because you go to a tech company, they have a marketing person. You go to a services company that might have a marketing person or 20 salespeople, driving that top line revenue, or that there's a real opportunity and niche there that you were able to find and create a career around. So when you started Total Attorneys, you mentioned it was an apartment, just yourself. How big did it get, maybe in terms of employee number?
Probably about 200, just over 200, maybe 230 at one point, somewhere in that range.
Okay, so over 200 employees. I would imagine, I could guess that your role had changed throughout that journey, and you had to wear different hats, and different things became different important, and the business needed certain things from you at different times. And there's no bachelor's degree around entrepreneurship or wearing so many multiple hats just over a relatively short period of time. And maybe talk about your journey and how you've had to evolve as a leader, and maybe even get into some of the mistakes that you could make that maybe you could take back that you might apply to a new opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's oftentimes the most exciting thing about starting a company is you do kind of start out as CEO/janitor, right? And you have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and do every single task inside the company. And when you have a founder-led company, that's imbued into the culture because everybody knows that there's not a job in the company that's being done today that you didn't do in some form or fashion, and that everybody should know that they need to jump in anywhere they can to help out. I found that I was able to learn as I went along. I mean, I was 25 years old. I mean, by the time I was 30, I was running a $30 million company. Like, it's a pretty quick pace to pick that stuff up. But that excited me, and I had great mentors. I reached out to people, asked questions, and focused on bringing in really good people. And at the time of Total Attorneys, for a long time, I was the oldest person there, which is also kind of interesting, at least the first few years. And so it was a lot of young people that were incredibly motivated, that were given an opportunity to do something they'd never done before. And you either sink or swim. And those that swam were able to grow more in those years at Total Attorneys than they have anywhere else in their career. They may be running product somewhere at another company. They may be doing this, they may be doing that. But when I run into people, one of the greatest things I take pride in is hearing what they've been up to and what they've been able to, turn their career into based on some of the early experiences maybe they had working with me. And it's pretty universal that I'll hear back, the pace we were moving, how much we were doing on the fly and figuring it out, and being given the opportunity to jump into the deep end of the pool and be forced to swim taught me more in that period of time than I've ever had in any other role outside of Total Attorneys. And I think we're recreating a similar type thing at Bridge Legal right now.
Very well said. Yeah, I can relate to a certain degree. We have 30 employees. A lot of listeners know I started my business 2 years ago, and someone had taught me this. Maybe I read this in a book, but at every stage of growth, that CEO role at the beginning is more of a subject matter expertise role. Like, you have to be good at selling. You have to be good if maybe you're a technical founder, like, you got to be good at building out the code. And then over time, as you grow, the skill set turns more to team building and vision, mission, values, and culture, and then being a proponent of that. But I mean, I can speak from experience. You're making a billion decisions all the time. And then as you get more people, as more scope, and more things need to happen collectively, your ability to put those right people in the right positions and then get them all to lock arms. And then every coffee interaction that I've had with you, every time I talk to you, you've always talked about culture and building culture. Maybe talk a little bit about your experience building culture at Total Attorneys and other places that you've led, and then how you're going to bring that into your new startup at Bridge Legal.
Yeah, I mean, culture is a squishy thing. It's really hard to kind of get your hands around what exactly it is. So I think it's important to start with one, you've got to identify that culture is important. And if you do, then you can make it a priority. If you don't, then the rest of what I'm going to say probably doesn't matter. If you do think it's important, then you have to be thoughtful about it. And culture really starts at the top. I like to say tone at the top. If you want a culture of fear, then yell at people, and that will trail down. All the people that report to you will yell at people, and this will be just kind of, what it is. If you want a culture of transparency and collaboration and servant leadership, well, tone at the top. Exude those qualities, and your team will pick up on that. My view has always been, the most important thing is the customer. That is the most important thing. None of us are here without the customer. But the only way you have customers, you keep customers and you make them happy, is having employees that think they're working in the greatest job they've ever had. And so I spend a lot of time on just, are people excited to come to work every day? I used to use the smile factor when we were actually in an office. I just walk around and, yeah, I'm the CEO. People probably smile at me a little more than they would otherwise. But are people generally kind of happy engaging with each other? If the answer to that is yes, then things are good. Like, people are happy, people are engaged, people are, feeling rewarded. If people are walking into the door of your company every day and they're kind of hum ho and they're just got to punch a clock, whatever, you're not going to get nearly as much out of the productivity, out of the innovation, out of the customer service, out of sales, all those things. People need to be excited to work around their colleagues, and they need to be excited to work on challenging things that they've never done before. If you're able to provide them that environment, well, then you're likely going to have success. The key is hiring people that fit into the culture you want to have. So, if you hire someone and they're not a fit for the culture you want to build, you're not going to turn them into that. It's just not going to happen. So you need to be really thoughtful. And I spend a large portion of my time, as you well know, Tim, as you're helpful in our recruiting process, I spend a lot of time in recruiting. I spend a lot of time interviewing people. I spend a lot of time going through things. And I'm not spending as much time on skill set as I am, how is this going to fit into the team? What dynamic are they going to play in this culture we're building together? Do they have completely different points of view that they can add to make the dialogue and the debate more interesting? Do they come from a different background that's going to provide a deeper richness to, how we come up with new things? And that is, that's a lot of what I spend my time on, is, really making sure the people we're bringing in are the right people for the culture we're building. And if they're not, you generally find out pretty quickly. It generally doesn't take too long. And you can't be afraid to let people go when they're not a fit for that culture and when they're not able to do their role. So for me, everyone's got to decide what culture they want. I want a culture where people feel comfortable wearing flip-flops, but they sure as shit know how to sprint in them. I want a culture where people want to work around absolute A players and expect the best out of people, and are hoping that you'll fire the C players because there's no room for them on the team. And that your A players feel completely rewarded, supported, given every opportunity to succeed, and generally like coming to work every day.
Really well said. And I know from personal experience, you have, and we're doing some hiring support for your new company. What I've learned through working with you on that is that, man, this guy's had some experiences where he can get very quickly to if somebody is going to fit on his team that he's trying to create. And I think you've done a good job. And you're right, it's really hard to quantify or put KPIs around certain soft skills or experiences or culture related stuff, but putting a little bit of a science around, hey, is this person going to fit into that? And it's specifically some of the questions that you ask on interviews. Can you speak to that a little bit? I've seen you excel in this area more than, maybe some other clients that we worked with in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a few kind of go-to questions. I'm almost hesitant to say what they are because, now people are going to know the question if they ever watch this podcast. But I'll throw a few out there. And if they've done their research and watched this podcast, that'll be evidence enough that they're exhibiting the traits that I'm looking for in some of these
That's
questions.
true. They're ambitious.
So one of the questions I like a lot is, what three accomplishments do you take the greatest pride in? I want achievers. And if people can rattle off, it doesn't really matter as much if they personal, their first child or being able to graduate college or, whatever it is. Or is it work, being on the leaderboard within 3 months, being in the top 10, and within 6 months, I got, number one on the team if it's a sales role. Just what are those things that they find those accomplishments? Another one I really like is tell me about a mistake you made, either work or personal, that taught you a significant lesson. And if you hear an answer like, oh, sometimes I'm sloppy and I don't check my work enough, and they probably use the word sloppy, but sometimes I don't check my work enough and I need to be more diligent in doing that, that's like a big X. If they go ahead and say, there was a time when I was given a new responsibility to send out this report to a client, and this report went to them every week and they expected to see it in a certain format. And I rushed through it because I didn't think it was that important. I sent it over and they ingested the file into their software and it broke the software for 2 days and this and that and this and that. And they tell this whole story. And they're like, what that taught me was no matter how mundane you may think a task is, you need to be sure you understand what's being done with your work product and what the next step is going to be, and really take time to ensure you do it properly. And I've never made that mistake again. That's a great answer. And that's what I'm looking for there is, are they a discerner? Are they capable of having experiences and making mistakes, which I do every single day, and I'm sure you do as well? Are they capable of learning from those and processing that and putting that into their knowledge bank of how they're going to use that moving forward? If they can't answer that correctly, I won't hire them. I literally, if they can't get that one, that just doesn't, I'll give them maybe another chance if I think they just maybe flubbed it, because people get nervous on interviews. I have another question that kind of drills in on discernment, if you will. But if they're not a discerner and they're not an achiever, they're probably not right for the culture I'm trying to build.
Hiring is such a tricky, going off gut in some cases, trying to scientize it sort of process. And I think through experience, whether you're a founder, CEO of a company of 200 plus people, or you've just supervised somebody before, knowing that if you make that right move on the front end and get the right person on the front end, how much more capacity that team has, how much more the culture thrives, the opportunity cost of spending more time with that individual, or the pain when you do have to probably part ways with somebody and find somebody else and then train them up and get them productive. It can really, really, really stall things. And just working with you, it's clear that you have experience doing this before, now that you're getting another company kind of wrapped up. What are some other maybe learning lessons or takeaways maybe for an aspiring founder of a tech company moving forward that you picked up from your 10 plus years at Total Attorneys?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say maybe this would be some of the Total Attorneys experiences, and then some of the companies I've either been on the board of or mentored through Techstars or 1871. I think oftentimes people get too enamored with their own product, and they will spend an inordinate amount of time developing it, playing it, tweaking it. It's never good enough, and just kind of keep spinning. One of the most important things you can do in order to validate whether or not you're building a company or you're just playing around with some stuff is to get your product in market quickly, and not just get it to market quickly, get someone to agree to give you money for it. That's when it's actually real. If you can first convince someone to pay you for something you've built, and then deliver them a solution that they think is worthy of continuing to pay for it, you're now actually building a company. Everything else is just white noise. That's the only thing that matters. Is there a pain that's strong enough for you to solve with what you've built? Are people willing to pay for that medicine? And will they keep buying that medicine? So, I always look for big pain, right? Big pain. Is it like you twisted your ankle and you're kind of limping a little bit? You may limp through it, right? Is it a terminal illness? Like you need to find more business, or you need to manage accounts receivable, or you need to deliver a client experience that's exceptional through technology? Those are pains that, like, if a business doesn't find their next client, well, they go out of business. That's a pain I want to solve. And so finding that early in your journey and doing that as fast as possible, and being the one to have those conversations. I always encourage, young founders to get out there and sell, and don't be afraid of it. One of the best days I ever had at Techstars was with a company called Retrofit, and they do logistics software. And they were kind of sitting around talking about the sales process, and they were like, "Oh, we've got this logistics software, it can be used by anybody. It makes routing like 20 times better, blah, 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 blah." I'm like, "Well, who have you sold it to?" "Well, we haven't demoed it yet." I'm like, "Well, who would you sell it to?" "Cleaners." And I'm like, "Okay, well, go to Google Maps." And they go to Google Maps, they pull up Cleaners, and I literally started cold calling on a speakerphone with the two founders in the room. Maybe there's three of them in there. And got like 2 leads. One of them turned into an appointment. One of them turned into a client, I think. And they were like, "Wow, that was easy." I'm like, "Don't be afraid of the phone. Just pick it up and dial it. That's the worst thing that happen. They're going to hang up. You're going to start to get real feedback on what your product is, what it does. Will someone buy it?" So I always encourage people to get to the sales process quickly. And then once you do figure out something that sells, then focus on who are the right people, because nothing is more important than kind of getting that right early team together. So first, product validation through cash, and then second, making sure you kind of get those early hires. You do it right, and you get the right people in that are going to be able to wear a lot of hats in the beginning, because it's all hands on deck in those early days.
Oh, I've done some 1871 mentorship stuff. I've done some angel investing. We play in similar circles. I feel like there's just so many ideas out there. There's so many people that want to quit their job, start something. And a lot of this is glamorized. You see some of the IPOs in Chicago, or you see all those tech companies in San Francisco, and there's millionaires overnight kind of thing. But we've talked about this before. There's a lot of things that are glamorized, and there's often a lot of things that are missed. And you can see it if you have, I don't know, a founder has a company that doesn't have that big pain point, and it's just making whatever they're doing a little bit more convenient. It's almost like shit's pretty convenient now. There's been 20 years of this internet, mobile, stuff kind of going on. It's pretty convenient. So it would have to be really convenient for me to switch from Netflix to something else. It would have to be really convenient for me to switch banks, right? And I think it starts with the ideas. It's almost like you got to have a good idea first, but then there's like a billion things in terms of execution and fundraising and picking a co-founder and so on and so forth. Or how am I going to sell this thing? Have you thought about that? And it's really hard, I think, to find the ones that have a good, interesting idea or product, and then maybe have the capacity or the vulnerability in themselves to learn in order to get that execution piece right. What have you seen? What are some other areas that you've seen, either from mentorship, doing this yourself, or investing personally, that people often miss?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on it in the beginning there. So much of being a startup tech CEO is glamorized to the point where it's almost got, in certain circles, rock star status, right? Like it's seen as this very glamorous thing. And I think people see that side of it. The flashy headlines, the news articles. I had my fair share in my 20s and 30s, and I'm not going to say that wasn't enjoyable. It's nothing wrong with people telling you you're great, and your company's great, and you're Inc. 500 this, and you win awards, and that's all really cool. But the amount of pain and struggle that every tech founder that I know that's seen success has gone through is immense. It's not a straight line of success. It's actually way more like this, and really, really jagged. And those that make it through to the other side are willing to walk through the desert for sometimes years on end to get to the other side for the next pop up, and then it's down again and then back up. And it's sometimes I think there's a disservice done to young founders. And I think 1871 has done great things, but I also think it's glamorized this, it's almost like a country club where you kind of go there and it's like a club for founders and entrepreneurs. And that's really great in a sense. It builds community, and I think it's done really good things. But I think it also makes it feel like it's just getting cups of coffee with other founders and, brainstorming ideas, when in reality, it's hiring. It's, when you run out of cash, we've had Total Attorneys. We had 2 massive layoffs. I had to walk in front of 45 people and tell them they were fired at the same time. I walked out of that room crying. There's just things that are so hard to do. And, running out of cash, trying to manage receivables, all these things that are in the weeds of what it takes to actually build a company that don't get written about in Inc. magazine or, and other things that I wish more people would tell those stories. And maybe, your next season of Fireside Chat could be focused on the horror stories of successful companies, because they all have them. And it's something people need to know before they get involved in starting a business. Is this isn't all roses and lollipops. That said, it's incredibly rewarding. You get to build something that's never been built before. You get to create opportunities for people that might not otherwise have those opportunities. You get to celebrate with a group of people when you accomplish something. And you also have a group of people when things aren't going well to commiserate with and figure out how to get it to the next level. But it's not a rocket ship. There are very few companies that kind of start and just have this meteoric rise. They're out there, but none of the ones that I know from my peer group that started, tech companies in the early 2000s had those rides. They all went through immensely difficult things, and those that punched through and walked through the desert and just kept going one foot in front of the other, they were the ones that were successful. By the wayside are tons of companies and founders, for that matter, that are just exhausted, burnt out, and didn't have the stamina because they maybe didn't expect what the ride was going to be.
I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth a little bit. On the one side, I do think there's so many resources out there. If you don't know something about finance, you can learn it. If you don't know something about fundraising, there's information galore. There's mentors such as like yourself that are willing to carve out some time to pay it forward. It is awesome. There's a lot of good things that kind of come with entrepreneurship, but to your point, like there's a million decisions that get made, not literally, but every week, you're always making a call on something, and some of them are nominal, but some of them are big, and some of them have an opportunity cost, and some of them can create distractions for you. And just being in this entrepreneurial scene in Chicago for the last 5 years, you see it a lot. You see a lot of companies that have all the accolades that are like, holy cow, like on the surface, PR wise, they're a rocket ship. They're looking like they're kicking ass. And then you find out that, something didn't work out and they're out of business, or they sold for pennies on the dollar a year later. Or, then you hear other stories like we're having Jason Vandemoom on the show next month. I think we got to look at the date, but Active Campaign, his company's doing really, really, really great. But the dude started that in 2003, and he's just kind of kept his head down for a long period of time and made those mistakes. But you could go out of business, and if COVID hits and you need cash, like you're the first one to let the salary go. And I think that's a little scary to people. And I've run into a lot of people that are starting companies that it was just like, hey, I graduated after the last recession hit. All I've seen is an 8-9 year bull run. Everything's been easy. Every company that I've gotten an offer from and every career move that I've made, there really hasn't been that much of a downside or sacrifice. And, a lot of them just don't want to work for someone else anymore. And that's really their main driver of starting a business. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to your point, you've seen it and you've been through certain cycles of this too. So let's get to this cycle, and then we'll get to a question or two, and then we can let you go. I know you're busy. So COVID hits, and a lot of different companies are, experiencing different things with this based on your product or service. You're either accelerating growth that was already there. You're in the column where you're going to benefit from this. That's a small percentage. Most companies are getting negatively impacted by this in one form or fashion. In the tech community, you have folks at different fundraising cycles that are kind of getting affected. But I think in general, people, it's a tough environment to kind of navigate through, whether that be from a sales standpoint, hiring bandwidth, whatever it might be. Date back to 10 years ago, last recession that we've had, maybe speak to that time and leading a company and during that time, maybe a nugget or two. And then what would you tell maybe founders that are maybe getting some negative experiences from this COVID situation that's affecting themselves or their companies, based on your experience from 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, regardless of the time, maybe more so in times when you're kind of entering recessions, the worst thing you can do is get stuck. you got to make a decision and you got to go forward in some direction or the other. And oftentimes you're going to be wrong, but just be willing to make that decision and go. If you're pondering something over and over and over, I mean, it's not going to work. You've got to think thoughtfully about things and spend some time and, not just be willy-nilly about it. You can't get stuck. You just have to make a decision, go forward, make the next decision, go forward. You talk about a million decisions being made in a week. The only way you can do that is by ready, firing, aim sometimes. You can't line up the shot perfectly every single time. It just won't work. There's too many decisions to be made. There's too much to be done. And sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. Learn from when you're wrong, move on, and hopefully you increase your odds of being right the next time you got to make a quick decision. The other thing I'd say is focus on what's really important. What is really important. And, I always go back to customers. What do they need? How are you going to be continuing to support them? How can you make them more money, particularly in these times? If you can find a way where you can actually make your customers money, that's a great place to be in a down economy. That's what everybody needs. Is they need more business, they need more clients, they need more everything. How can you help be a part of that solution for them? And be open and honest with your team. If things are not going well, share that with them. If things are going well, don't be afraid to share that, even in a down economy. In 2008, Total Attorneys had one of its biggest growth years. I think we went from 12 to $24 million in revenue that year. So don't be shy about that. It's actually not a bad thing to share. We're doing well, others aren't. Let's see what we can do to help and give back and contribute for a variety of ways. But just be open and honest. And I think that is, when you're maintaining a team internally, the biggest thing you can do from a culture standpoint is just have open and honest, conversations with folks. Back in Total Attorneys, when we had a layoff, I had to lay off those 45 people. That was one of the things I didn't do. Everybody saw, we were growing like a rocket ship, but didn't really have a sense that, things had started to slow down a little bit, and we weren't going to go from 24 to 50 million in a year. We actually weren't going to have 100% growth one year, which, on the surface, you'd say, wow, that should be pretty obvious. But when you go from 2 to 6 to 12 to 24, you think you just double every year. You got a Midas touch. Well, we didn't double. And that probably should have been something, talking about those struggles a little bit more. So I've learned that. I think there is no magic bullet in a down economy other than focusing on what matters and being very, pragmatic with your cash situation as a business. Cash is king always. If you're, starting the business and you're now got it up and running, if you don't have a weekly cash forecast, get one. And then if you don't know how to do it, ask someone to help you put one together. But really knowing where your cash is at every single moment, so that you're ensuring yourself you've got enough fuel before you run out of gas. I like to say starting a company is like building an airplane engine while the plane's already taken off. Well, one of the keys to making it successful is having the people that are comfortable building that engine while the plane is coasting. But the other one is making sure you have enough fuel aboard to ensure you give yourself the time to complete the engine. And so those are things I'd be thinking about, and I'm thinking about.
Well said. Well said. Well, we have to talk about Bridge Legal. You have a exciting new venture. It's relatively new, but I know, it's newer. So let's talk about that a little bit. What is Bridge Legal? What problem are you trying to solve? Which stage are you at? And let's talk about a little bit about the future of Bridge Legal as well.
Sure. So we at Bridge Legal feel that the experience for both those delivering legal services as well as those consuming legal services is fundamentally broken. We don't think there is a high level of satisfaction on either side of it. And we believe our platform can help make that better. So we've started out in a few areas with our automated sort of platform. And so we help automate marketing. So law firms, and we work with consumer law firms, particularly right now we're in one vertical, which is consumer bankruptcy law firms. We'll be expanding out to other firms, but we're really nailing this in the first vertical first. So consumer bankruptcy law firms, we help them with their marketing. So automating how to most efficiently find their next client, which is a huge pain. And then we help them with automating their intake processes. So making sure calls get placed out through our software within less than a minute, and there's good follow-up. And so when someone requests information, you've got the right processes and procedures in place to actually get someone on the phone and gather all the information to begin that intake process and make them a client. And then after that, we automate the payments process. So managing their accounts receivable. Generally a law firm charges maybe $1,500 or so for a consumer bankruptcy case. Those consumers may pay over time. They might not have that all at once. So how can you build a process to schedule those payments and reschedule them? You're trying to help someone who's struggling financially eliminate $20,000 or $30,000 in debt, maybe more. Well, they may not have funds right away to pay. So how do you manage that process? So we've added case management functionality, communication functionality, some automated, and really trying to keep the consumers aware of where their case status is and let the law firms spend time serving their clients rather than worrying about, process efficiency and running around with chickens with their heads cut off because they've got, not the right tools in place to ensure there's a consistent process and a standardized process that's delivered. And ultimately, that's what leads to greater experiences for both the providers of legal services and the consumers of legal services. And we think we're uniquely situated to improve the experience for both of those audiences and do it through tech and process standardization.
Very cool. Very cool. So what's 2020 been like for you and the Bridge team? What do you foresee for maybe the next 12, 24 months? What's the plan? What's the vision?
Yeah, so we've grown a good bit this year. We've added on a number of team members. We've grown revenue. We've grown the number of firms we're supporting. We've expanded our platform from a product standpoint in terms of technology development. And so we are really focused on readying for what's going to be coming here in the next couple quarters, which is a tsunami of work for our customer base. So consumer bankruptcy law firms are going to be very, very busy in the coming quarters, whether that's in the fourth quarter, whether that's in the first quarter next year or the second quarter. Economists have different views, but there is no question there's going to be some pain that needs solving with consumers. They're going to need to get a fresh start and move on with their lives post this, dramatic economic downturn. And so how can we better fortify our tool set so that we can empower these consumer bankruptcy attorneys, which there are a lot more of them coming, to be able to support all of these consumers. And I know judges are thinking about this, like how are they going to be able to handle all these cases? And so we're thinking about it from the professional service provider side, meaning how can we give the tools to the lawyers so they can be more efficient and deliver all the services that are going to be needed to consumers? And then on the consumer side, how can we improve the experience for them through text messaging and chatbots and mobile apps so they can check the status of their case and all of those things. So we're readying for that. We're talking about the next law area, which may or may not be this year, it might be next year. But the tool set we're building, as I think I mentioned earlier, Total Attorneys had just about every consumer law area you could think of. We're doing a much deeper build. We're creating an operating model for law firms to adopt on our platform to deliver a better service and really make their firms more profitable at the same time. So it just takes more time, whereas a lead gen network, you just kind of put up a new landing page, light up some new Google ads and start selling leads. This is a deeper and heavier build. So we'll be adding some new lawyers out in the future. And we really view our platform as being able to transform an industry for the better for those that are receiving the service and those that are delivering the service. And so that's really what the future holds for us. It's a huge industry, and we think we can have an outsized impact given our experience on the team and our understanding of the marketplace.
Very well said. Exciting times at Bridge Legal for sure. Ed, we have one question before we let you go. We got a question from Rick. Rick asks, what advice would the current version of yourself give the 20-something version of yourself when you started your entrepreneurial journey?
That's a great question. Part of me wonders if I knew what I knew today, would I have even started the company the way I did? So I almost wonder if being dumb wasn't actually an advantage at 25, because I don't know if I'd say I got a $20,000 credit card and a cell phone and a laptop and, I'm going to quit my job and jump all into it if I knew all the challenges that would present themselves along the way. That said, I definitely think, one of the things I do every now and then is I'll open up a financial statement from like 2007 or something, or 2005, and I'll look at it and I'll be like, what would I do with the business if I go back to like March 2005? And I think it's a good exercise, and it's kind of to this point. There's definitely things I think I would have done strategically You know, when you're 27, 28, 29, you're running a company with millions of dollars of revenue coming in. I was essentially throwing a party. I mean, it was like expenses were like, I look at what we spent on, you know, craziness. I mean, if someone would have said we should have a Benihana table in the kitchen, there's a likelihood I would have bought a Benihana table and had it installed in the kitchen like the next week. Like it was that type of go-go environment. But I don't think I changed that. You know, I was young, I was in my 20s. It was a fun time, and it added to the culture and the excitement, and it revved up sales, and like we, you know, so I don't know if I'd change that. You know, I think overall, maybe I'd say don't get too high and don't get too low. You know, you're going to go like this a lot and you're going to go like this a lot. Try and maintain, keep yourself right in the center, because it's, you know, it's easy to buy into everybody who, you know, is telling you you're the, you know, you've got the tiger by the tail. You know, it's easy to kind of celebrate the great wins and the awards. And then it's also easy to get really sucked into the darkest of the dark times. And the reality of the situation is probably somewhere between those two things. You're not up here and you're not down here. You're probably somewhere in the middle. But when you're a startup entrepreneur, you find yourself often in the same day going like this and just bouncing back and forth between these two places. And so I think if I were to look back and say, if I had myself at 25 to sit down and go get a beer and, you know, at the time, you know, just say, don't let yourself get too sucked into the greatest highs or too sucked into the greatest lows. Try and keep yourself as even keeled as possible, because that's the reality of the situation where things probably exist.
Very well said, Rick. Thank you so much for the question, Ed. That was great. Thank you so much for carving out the time. This has been awesome. It's been great getting to know you over the last few years, and exciting to see what Bridge Legal's doing and what's to come with Bridge Legal. If folks wanted to check out Bridge Legal or find you online, where can they find you?
Sure. Yeah, Bridge Legal. You can definitely just check out the website, bridgelegal.com. It's a decent representation of what we do today. I always feel like our website's about 6 months behind what we actually do, but it's a decent representation. And you know, you're welcome to reach out to me on email. I'm easy to find. I'm ed@bridgelegal.com. So feel free to ping me there. Tim, it's been awesome, you know, getting to know you over the last couple of years. I've got the chance to talk with you as you were kind of doing your consulting thing in between your last company and now starting this one, and to watch the growth you've achieved and the team you've put together and the thoughtfulness you've approached a market that you deeply understood with a new twist on it. I can say, as a consumer of the services of what you're doing, you've definitely solved a pain, and one that is acutely felt. So kudos to you. It's been a great experience getting to know you. And when you're ready to turn the tables and have a fireside chat where you're interviewed, I'd be honored to be the person interviewing you. So I would suggest in the future that we actually get your story, because it's a great story, and one that I think your audience would love to hear.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. I really appreciate that. I'll have to hit you up for a testimonial or something like that one of these days. For sure. That was very nice. Very kind words. And yes, when it's my turn, you could be the host for sure.
I'll play host for a day.
That sounds good. Until then, thank you again for the time. Attendees, thank you so much for joining. We'll talk to everybody soon. Take care.